Welcome to Fantasy Hockey Advice. This episode, I'm going to be talking about how NHL free agency affects fantasy value. In fantasy hockey, players' values are affected by free agency because in free agency, players change teams and it affects their real life value. But what you don't know is that it also has a huge effect on their fantasy values. Some players' fantasy values went up, while others' fantasy values went down. Some players' fantasy values stayed the same. This episode focuses on how much free agency really affects players that fantasy values went up are Milan Lucic, Andrew Ladd, Staal, Parenteau, David Backes, Ryan Campbell, Keith Yandle, and Justin Schultz. Milan Lucic played alongside Connor McDavid. This is obviously going to give a huge boost to his fantasy value. He should return to the form he was at in Boston. Andrew Ladd will be playing alongside John Tavares on the first line. Anyone who plays alongside John Tavares automatically gets a boost in fantasy value. Troy Brouwer is going to be a huge part next season. He will be playing alongside Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan, and is also playing on the first power play unit. Eric Staal is poised for a bounce-back year this year. He is going to be centering the first line of the Wild alongside Zach Parise and Charlie Coyle. He's also playing on the first power play unit as well. Parenteau returns to where he had the most success, and that is playing alongside John Tavares on the right wing. He could be a sleeper pick this year. David Backes is going to take on a much bigger role with the Bruins this season than he did last year with the Blues. He's playing on the first line with Patrice Bergeron and Brad Marchand. He is also playing on the second power play unit as well. Ryan Campbell returns to the Chicago Blackhawks for a second stint. While he isn't a core player anymore, he is still a very productive player for them. Keith Yandle is going to be playing on the first defensive pair for the Panthers and their first power play unit this year. You can bet that his fantasy value will be much higher than it was last year. Justin Schultz is going to be much better this season than he was in previous seasons because he's playing for a much better team. It's just that simple. Players whose fantasy value stayed the same are Frans Nielsen, Loui Eriksson, Alex Radulov, Dan Hamhuis, Jason Demers, Teddy Purcell, and Sam Gagner. Sam Gagner was just a depth signing for the Columbus Blue Jackets. He isn't going to have much fantasy value in the first place, just like last year. Teddy Purcell is a player that can play in the top six, but he wasn't consistent enough to maintain his spot there. We already know what Teddy Purcell is at this point of his career. Jason Demers, in real life, going to change his fantasy value so it will stay the same. Dan Hamhuis is a good defenseman in real life. The first pair for the Stars, but he's not going to put up many points, so his fantasy value won't change. Radulov is a pure scorer, and when he's on his game, he is a game breaker. When he doesn't want to play, he is useless. Is at this point of his career, and we know what he can do. Loui Eriksson isn't playing on the first line with the Sedins, but he does get first unit power play time, so Loui Eriksson, for that reason alone, should still have the same fantasy value as he did last year. He's going to get much less work than he did last year, but look for James Reimer to still put up the similar stats that he did last year with the Sharks. Frans Nielsen is still going to have the same fantasy value as he did last year because he's still going to be the number 2 center on the team, and he's still playing on the first power play unit. The players whose fantasy values went down are Kyle Okposo, David Perron, Alex Goligoski, Chad Johnson, Jamie McGinn, Lee Stempniak, Thomas Vanek, Mikkel Boedker, and David Schlemko. David Schlemko was a pleasant surprise for the New Jersey Devils last year. However, this year, he will not be nearly as productive as he was last year. He will get a much reduced role as a third pair defenseman, and he will get some power play time. Mikkel Boedker, yes, he may play on the first line with Joe Pavelski and Joe Thornton, but as of right now, he has no power play time. That is going to have a huge effect on his fantasy value. Thomas Vanek has a last chance to redeem himself. This is arguably his last chance in the NHL. However, he is projected to play on the third line of the Red Wings and possibly the second power play unit, which is worse than the Wilds. Lee Stempniak had a career year last year with the New Jersey Devils. Do not expect a similar year from him this year, especially with the lack of firepower in the Hurricanes lineup. Jamie McGinn is projected to play on the third line of the Arizona Coyotes and has no power play time. This would mean that he doesn't really have that much fantasy value unless you're in a deep league. Chad Johnson left the Sabres to sign with the Calgary Flames, and that would make Chad Johnson an unreliable fantasy option because Brian Elliott may be getting the majority of the games. Alex Goligoski goes from top pair defenseman in Dallas to a second pair defenseman that plays on the second power play unit in Arizona. David Perron signing with St. Louis was just a mystery. Why the St. Louis Blues signed Perron, I would never know. But Perron is a lot worse now than he was in St. Louis the first time. So his fantasy value is going down. Kyle Okposo's value is taking a hit because he's not playing with John Tavares. Even though Ryan O'Reilly is good and the Sabres have some good talent, they just aren't as good a team as the Islanders when Okposo left them. As you can see, players' values can change dramatically or drastically because of the change in scenery. Next, I will be talking about how trades this offseason affected fantasy hockey.